Welcome to the Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. This podcast is designed to provide momentum in our God-given roles of leadership as we partner together to equip today's Christian leaders for tomorrow's opportunities. Whether you're a pastor, youth leader, ministry volunteer, parent, or student, we want to be your go-to and most trusted resource for equipping and encouragement when it comes to your ministry and leadership influence. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to a Momentum Ministry Partners podcast. My name's Eric, and today we have with us Jeff Bogue. Jeff in the house.
Jeff in the house. Hey, everybody. Good to see you guys. Good to talk to you.
Can we superimpose some like Christmas music, Jeff?
Yeah, you should. Because it is Christmas season.
It's October when we're recording this, but I guess I didn't need to tell our listeners that, but I feel the need to share it since it's nice.
Yeah, but I tell you, we being a pastor, every pastor and every ministry leader, volunteer, everybody understands that Christmas is coming. Like I literally just left a Christmas meeting to get our Christmas message down and all the rest. So yeah, it's Christmas in October. It's when it starts.
It is that time of year. I went into the store the other day, Jeff, and somehow we have completely skipped like Halloween, Thanksgiving, like all of the like Halloween, Thanksgiving stuff is already put in the back. It's October.
Yeah.
It's October.
I noticed that. I noticed that the other day too, and I'm like, man, you guys even skipped Halloween.
Yeah.
This year, right? Because usually it's baby Jesus and a demon right next to each other. And they're already. I don't know if they sold out or what. Pumpkins are for sale everywhere, but Christmas trees are put out. But it
is fascinating. We're gonna talk Christmas today, Jeff. We're gonna think through. If you're a pastor, if you're a communicator, if you're on staff at a church, it is challenging every year.
Yeah.
How do we keep Christmas fresh, relevant, applicable even for guests, newcomers, visitors that would come to your church? So it's a thing. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive in, shall we?
Sure. Go for it.
All right.
Tell us how to do it, Eric. Tell us. Solve our problems.
I'm the host.
No, not today. We're switching roles. Eric Miller, everybody, is going to tell us how to plan Christmas.
Read the Bible. There you go. How do you do it, Jeff? You've been a pastor longer than me, so I will defer to you.
Are you calling me old?
Yes.
Let's talk about ageism how it has no place within the church.
I think the Bible calls it well along in years.
Oh.
That's how Mary referenced that in Luke.
His buddy. How do we do it? Well, we do start planning our Christmas stuff well in advance, and so I think there's definitely the part of that there's almost like a calendar management where Christmas is coming every year. By the way, same thing with Easter. Mm-hmm. And if you're not in ministry, it would seem on the surface that Christmas and Easter are easy things. They're obviously pivotal to our faith, pivotal to Jesus's life. I like to say that everything in the Christian life is built off of Easter, off the resurrection of Christ. Andy Stanley's comment, that our faith is built off of an event, and that's Jesus's resurrection. So it's something that we're passionate about, obviously, and something that we want the world to know. That's not the problem. The problem is not that the Bible isn't clear, or that the story is somehow like mysterious and hard to explain, like a Jonah and the whale is kind of hard to explain, kind of thing.
Right.
So it's not even like that. The problem is the creative side of it, of how do you say the same thing year after year after year in a way that is a captivating way. So I just passed 31 years of being in ministry. So this coming Christmas will be my 32nd time that I've preached on Christmas.
Mm.
And that's not easy. It's not easy to think of things in a new way and think of things in a creative way. So a couple of things that I've learned over the years is this. First of all, I would say this: to preach on Christmas, you don't have to tell the Christmas story every year. And I've done that, and there's actually a lot of interest in it, like who were Mary and who were the wise men, and those things I think are important, and I think that you should do that, but you don't have to do that every year. So usually what we do is we say we're going to preach on Jesus every December, no matter what. And we're going to end his story with what we call the Christmas program. Kind of depends on how you run your cycles of, how many weeks you spend preaching on for Christmas and how many Christmas programs you do. But like, I think I'm going to probably teach on John chapter 2 for 2 weeks in a row. And then we'll put together, the way that we do it is we'll put together a creative Christmas program. In that program, we will tell either verbally or through multimedia the entire narrative of Christmas. We'll use music to do that too. And then I will take a snapshot of Jesus's life and a snapshot of the Christmas narrative itself, and make that the message, so to say, of the Christmas program.
Mm.
So I think one is just releasing yourself from that, and don't feel like you have to retell the same story every year. The second thing I would say, so first I would say plan. 2, I would say release yourself from that. Number 3, I would say have a post plan for Christmas. So there's a conversation that you need to have as a youth leader, as a pastor. And the conversation is Christmas a conclusion or is it a beginning? So am I going to start preaching about Jesus Thanksgiving weekend, and then I'm going to hit like a crescendo or a climax on Christmas? Or am I going to launch a set of thoughts on Christmas that are going to go into January? Now, what we choose to do here at our church is we choose to launch, because we know that our peak months as a church are January, February, and March, and April up to whenever Easter falls. That's our peak attendance, and that is where we're interacting with people who are not connected to Christ or loosely connected to Christ, and they're super open to a really good conversation about who Jesus is. So we tend to speak about Jesus specifically in December, and then again in January. Mm-hmm. And we think about what is the gospel pathway, so to say, that we're going to take between Christmas and Easter. So that directly affects how and what you speak on in your Christmas program, right? And we're going to put that consideration in there. And then the fourth thing I would say, I'd written down notes because I knew we were going to talk about this. But the fourth thing I would say is this: the Christmas story does not get old to people who don't know it well. So I have spoken on something 31 times. I have studied 31 times. It feels repetitive to me. It doesn't feel repetitive to the person who comes to church 5 times a year. And it may feel repetitive to the church that's not growing and it's the same group of people you're talking to every week. Well, then what I would do is I would make Christmas very evangelistic. And when you tell that story again, those people won't complain because their friends are hearing it for the first time. So we kind of have to remember that. Like, people don't pay attention to our sermons the way that we do. they don't even remember the stories that we tell. So I often recycle things for Christmas and steal people's stuff. I'll look what other pastors say, because it is the people know, if they come to services, they kind of know what Christmas is, but they don't understand the depth of it, and you're not repeating yourself to them. And even if you are, they're downloading that on a different level than they would otherwise.
Yeah. Jeff, there's a couple of things that really stick out to me of what you said. For one, I just turned 30, so you're
Yeah, you just turned 30 like 12 years ago.
I was gonna say nobody's probably believing. I think it's important that I love what you're saying. Like, keep it simple. Don't overthink it. I think sometimes in our world today, as pastors, we do watch other people, what they did for Christmas last year, and we think we have to top that, or we get like stuck on social media and what other people have done, and we're like, what we should do is get real animals and bring them down the aisle, and like it just. Or if the pastor zip lines out of the balcony and lands on the stage, and it can get crazy. I'm like, let's keep it simple. Keep the main thing, and communicate the story, the message, the hope that we have in Christ, in what his birth actually means, and the Easter, what his resurrection actually means for our daily lives and how we apply that. So keeping it simple.
Keep it simple. And I'm all about creative stuff. We don't do a lot of like flying angels or anything like that. We usually are more creative musically or with multimedia. So I encourage you to be creative, but I'll give everybody a Christmas idea right now. Okay. So this one's for free. Normally these are $9.99. But this is a Christmas present. So my first year of being a lead pastor, I had taken leadership over what we called the Bath campus of Grace Church. We would have about 120, 130 people on a Sunday, right? So this is 25 years ago. So we were a very normal church. Our building was a wood A-frame building with pews, and there was a pulpit, and there was a communion table, and there was outdated carpet, and it's what we had, it's what we had. And then it was just me. So this was before my ministry partner, Ezra Wimberly, is just so creative. So this was me coming up with ideas, right? So just not nearly the expertise that I would have now. So here was a very creative, very simple idea. I got candles, Mary, Joseph, Jesus, two shepherds, and 3 wise men. And the Mary and Joseph candles were the biggest ones. The shepherd and the wise men were all kind of the same. And then Jesus was like a small candle. And I set the candles up kind of in the shape of a nativity set. And then what I did was I said Jesus was the light of the world. And then I lit his candle, and then from his candle I lit Mary's, I lit Joseph's, shepherd's wife, and I told their story as we lit each candle. Now this is, like I said, maybe because it was Christmas, maybe there was like 140 people in the room, but it was very, very warm.
Yeah.
And then we had decorate a little bit, turn the lights down, and I told those stories. We would interject songs, and these were hymns. What child is this? Oh, little town of Bethlehem, joy to the world, and we interwove them with a guy playing a guitar and us singing out of hymnals. That was what I did for Christmas. And people who were there still talk about it. It was different. It took almost no money, and it's what I had to work with. I just put a little bit of thought into it.
Yeah.
The next year, same building, more maybe people in it. I borrowed a real baby, and I didn't make this big illustration. I just literally held the baby and I walked up and down the aisle, and the whole theme was, I said, guys, this really happened. And Jesus, the God humbled himself to be a real child. I had one lady that she's been with us ever since she accepted Christ. She's like, I never thought of it as real. It was because she was raised religiously. She's like, I never even like crossed my mind that it wasn't something more than a painting. So those are like really no money, really simple, kind of brought it home, singing out of hymnals. So you don't need the flying angel. I'm not, or the real camel. We don't do that either, but I don't want to knock people, like, because that creativity can be amazing sometimes. I go to the King and Country concert, their Christmas show every year, and like they're flying their drum cage. I mean, it's cool, so I'm like, I'm not totally opposed to it. But most of us don't have those kind of resources, and you can be very, very simple. Have a child sing Silent Night. It's powerful. Like a little, especially a little girl's voice, like a child's female voice, is just a powerful thing. And I'm not talking about a kids program. I'm talking it's reverent.
Yep.
It's meaningful. And then that's like really memorable because you don't hear that.
Right.
So we do a lot of creativity. We do some traditions. We sing Silent Night and light candles every year. It's a tradition. It's fun. It's meaningful. But other than that, we're pretty non-traditional. I love something. This is hot off the press from 15 minutes ago. One of our pastors said the goal of Christmas is to reintroduce Jesus to people. And I'm like, you just nailed that. We're going with that as like a mission statement. People who come to Christmas services know who Jesus is. They're not stumbling in thinking, oh, I thought this was a Hanukkah thing. They know who Jesus is. We're reintroducing his heart and his mind to them creatively, but also very simply. And the way that we do it is we just make sure we talk about Jesus.
Jeff, I want to take a little tangent and maybe come back to this, but you said something earlier about deciding if you're launching into something or if you're coming out of something for your Christmas series. Now, I know you talked about like your metrics, and because of attendance and because of numbers in January, February, March, for the pastors who are trying to evaluate that and get an accurate assessment. I'm assuming everybody takes attendance. If you're not, you should figure that out. Collect your metrics. What kind of goes into that for you, or what would you recommend for maybe somebody listening to this to evaluate in that process of how to know how to leverage your Christmas series and your Christmas Sunday?
Yeah, so the first thing about metrics is that you have to define it, right? So I can make myself look as good or as bad as I want to. So what we do is we look and say we know the return rate. So we know that in Christmas season for our Christmas program, we know our normal weekend attendance is going to go up about 60 to 70%. So if you run 10 people, you're going to run 17 people, if it's 70%. So we know that. Part of why we know that is we've taught people over the years that Christmas is evangelistic. We're going to present the gospel. We're going to give people a chance to respond to it. And we are going to follow up with them on that. And so the congregation and the leadership of the church really partners strong. So people invite their three that they're praying for and things like that to those settings. So we're going to look and say it was a good attendance or bad attendance based on that. We a couple years ago, we literally had a blizzard in Northeast Ohio on Christmas Eve. So like our attendance was way low, but 4 people accepted Jesus and none of us cared that the attendance was low. We're like, it's a blizzard. It's like, what are you going to do? So we're going to look at that. The other thing we're going to do is say, if our attendance goes up 70%, we never think of big attendance as a win. We think of it as a measurement. What we look then is say, how do we get that 70% to move into a deeper relationship with God? So and I encourage pastors to do this, we start series at Christmas and we start series at Easter. So a guest is like we got the first conversation, and then we're going to bring you forward. Now there's always a weekend between Christmas and New Year. The only caveat to what I just said is if Christmas is like on a Monday, or it's like the day before Sunday. So every pastor knows what I'm talking about. The calendar gets wonky.
Yep.
But we're going to either start or invite you to that series. We're going to build classes and small group and helpful seminars around whatever that new series is. So there's lots of meet you where you are so we can take you where you need to go. With Christmas and Easter, we assume that we're going to mostly interact with religiously lost people. They are the people that would come to Christmas or Easter. We're going to do other series for people who would have no background with God whatsoever. So like I wrote a book last year called Assume I Know Nothing. That was a book and a series for people who have no background. They're like, I know about Jesus. What's the manger? What are you talking about? So we're just thinking all that through. And then we're thinking about how do we make that path of the gospel and through the gospel as easy as possible for people who are not tied closely to Christ.
Jeff, what are some of the ways then that in that Christmas Eve, Christmas Sunday service, how do you tease out those upcoming series? What are maybe some things that you've done with your staff that would help invite people to come back the following week or a week after the new year?
It always varies, but it's everything from here's a postcard inviting you back. It's targeting people. So the series is built for people with lots of anxiety, or it's built for people who have a past and don't think God can love them. Well, that would have been like the theme. Like we did a Christmas series one time. It was all about coming home and how and we built it off of the prodigal son. So we did everything from like returning to God to, we have a thing called Surrendering the Secret, which is abortion recovery, to sex abuse, to I'm a rebel. Like we would have had all these groups built around that, like all the reasons why you would look at yourself and say, my father doesn't want me to come home again. So that might be multimedia. That might be illustrations within the Christmas service. And then I say, hey, by the way, we're going to be doing this in January, all the way down to as simple as a postcard. We always have every Christmas service. We have people, we make a way to follow up with people. And so we'll then text them, email them. Now, I tend to always ask for permission to text and email. So what I say is, if you don't want us to interact with you, don't give us your contact information. Just give us your name and we'll pray for you. If you give us your contact information, we're going to contact you. So I'll say that like out loud. So it's just those kind of things that we work on.
I love the intentionality and the mindfulness of strategically thinking through at your event where you've got 60-70% attendance increase, purposefully planning out. You would be surprised at the number of churches that maybe don't think this way, intentionally looking to be strategic. So we're encouraging that. Like, if you've got those people there, figure out the right metrics, evaluate, plan, be strategic, think through how do you invite these people back to grow in their relationship with Christ. For some, Jeff, that might even be like asking before Christmas to survey, like, what are some of the things that the people in your circles need? I know your church has done that, or others maybe. What do you think about mining for, or how do you do that? Maybe what are the things that people need to know to mine for those topics? How do you come up with the following series of what is
Mhm.
applicable for maybe that 70% audience?
So when we are looking for that kind of information, we're looking to our community, not our church. So we're looking and saying, as a community, what are the biggest pain points? What are the biggest needs? Now, it's a little bit. It depends on how ingrained your church is in your community, how you get that information.
Okay.
Back in the day, when I first started, we literally went door to door and did surveys. And we said, if there was going to be a church in your community, what would you hope that church would do and accomplish? And what's fascinating is you very quickly from the community get very consistent answers, and none of them are, we wish that they would teach us more about Jesus.
Okay.
So this is where we would say, meet people at their point of need and take them to Christ. Now, over the years, because we are very ingrained in our community, we're able to do that a little bit differently. And then Grace is very unique in that we discipline our voice. So we try to speak the language of a 24-year-old unbelieving male. And the reason why we do that, one of our values is we do hard things. And the reason why we chose that is because that is the least likely person in North America to go to church, although that is starting to change. New research is coming out saying that young women are less likely to go to church than young men. It's very fascinating. So, but as a rule, that we would say, how do you make Jesus make sense to a 24-year-old unbelieving male?
Yeah.
Now, what happens then is parents and grandparents will let you get away with murder in your Christmas service because they want their kids there.
Yep.
And they're not there saying, I want a meaningful Christmas Eve night of worship. When they know that it's going to be a presentation of the gospel and we're trying to make Jesus make sense to their loved one, they're like, okay, you can play the secular song, you can do the drum line, Jeff can be a little bit irreverent. You don't have to, sing Mary's prayer, kind of a thing, because I'm more desperate for my kid or grandkid to hear about Jesus than I am desperate to have a internally focused Christmas Eve experience. So we're gonna find out a bunch of ways. I would say if your church doesn't naturally have a tie to the community, and I think you have to be very honest about that. If you don't have many non-believers in and around your church family, then you're not tied to the community. Then I go to the local college campus, I'd go door to door, I'd survey, I'd ask people. People talk to you. If you watch it online, it's a thing.
Yep.
Right? In reels and on Instagram and stuff like that. So it's not weird for somebody to walk up to you with a camera on their cell phone and say, can you tell me your view about blah blah? So I
I
just do
like
my
that.
homework with it and then try to speak to it.
Yep, that's good. All right, Jeff, let's go back maybe to the beginning side. What are some practical tips that you would give maybe to our younger pastors that would be looking to ensure that there are guests who are invited? How do you kind of set up that culture, that evangelistic mindset for your people, and then also encourage the community to attend and put the invitation out from the church side, not just from the members?
So if you want people who don't know Christ or are religiously lost to be at your Christmas service, you have to have a congregation that has an evangelistic culture to it. And because and that's probably a really big conversation maybe we should have for another podcast, Eric, where we talk about leading with evangelism. But if you don't have a evangelistic culture, then what happens is it's going to be hard for your people to trust you with an evangelistic event. So the first thing I would do is start with an evangelistic culture. And the first thing that I would do to start with an evangelistic culture is I would preach a series about Jesus and the harvest field. And everything from the woman at the well to the woman caught in adultery to Jesus going to towns and villages to the Great Commission. And then what we did years ago is, as we got this evangelistic culture kind of rooted into our church, you cannot disciple someone if you're not teaching them to evangelize. You're not mature spiritually unless you're doing the work of an evangelist. Like I said, there's a whole big conversation there. But as we got that rooted into the church, what I did is that's where the concept of pray for your three came from. So what we say is we encourage everyone to pray for three people that they love by name every day, that God would give them a no-brainer moment to share the reason for the hope that's within them. And when you get your congregation praying for lost people every day, and we got the bracelets, and I did sermon series on it, and they're all on our church's website somewhere, and you guys can steal them. Tell them Jeff Bogue said it was okay to use his stuff. We just drilled that and drilled that and drilled that. So what's happening at Christmas is people are bringing one of their three. And they have heard us talk about the gospel. They've heard us share the gospel. So they trust it's not going to be cringy. They trust it's not going to be heavy-handed. Our people know what to expect, and they've taken a comfort in having their friends be exposed to what we're going to do. Now, that is interesting. That does not mean you have to do it the way that I do it. So one of my dearest friends is a guy named Jim Brown. Jim is a pastor in Goshen, Indiana. Jim is a wind up and throw a fastball at your face every time preacher. Does crazy stuff, is strong, he's loud. We probably could not be much more opposite when it comes to style. He is a phenomenal evangelist. His church sees tons of people come to know Christ because his people know their pastor and what he's like, and they know what to expect.
Yeah.
And they have felt comfortable bringing their friends that he's teaching them to pray for and love into that environment. Okay? Yeah. So that environment's not the type of environment that I would create. So you don't have to be me. You don't have to be Jim Brown. You don't have to be Clayton King. You just have to be evangelistically focused. And your people who come to your church will learn to trust you. And they know that you're going to present the gospel the way that you present the gospel. But it's going to be presented clearly and without apology so that people can respond if they want to. So I'm not talking about copying people, and steal Jim's ideas. He would say, I'll speak for him. Jim would say, take everything I have. It's 100% yours. Tell him Jim Brown says, okay. So steal his ideas, steal my ideas, steal Keith Manier's ideas, steal Tony Vigny's ideas and Dan Gregory's ideas, and all these pastors. Take our ideas, but don't try to be us.
Yes.
Be you and teach your people to be outwardly focused and to kind of, so to say, trust you. And then they will take the relational risk of bringing their friend because they know that you will, how you'll present the gospel. And that's actually our creative ceiling for Christmas.
Mhm.
So, and Easter, we don't want at Grace Church, we don't want Christmas and Easter to feel all that indifferent or all that different from a normal church service. So we do special things and we have fun, but it's the same band, it's the same tech. That's why we don't bring camels down the aisle.
Right.
Okay. But churches do that and they see thousands of people come to know Christ because that's the way their church is.
Right.
And that's all good.
All right, Jeff, one last question here. If we were joining a church staff meeting and we're planning Christmas and we're strategizing and thinking and praying about this, we want to give the gospel, right? We want to share, give an invitation. What's maybe the best way that you've seen work to give the invitation, to allow for follow-up, to allow for a connection to be made, where the come back next Sunday, join us for this small group. What does that look like in that service that you have found to be reliable and go to?
Show people the heart and the mind of Jesus Christ. So the most famous verse in the Bible is John 3:16. God so loved the world, he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. One of the most important verses in the whole Bible is the next verse, John 3:17. For God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but the world through him might be saved. Jesus doesn't come to tell us what's wrong with us.
No.
He doesn't come to condemn us. He doesn't need to condemn us. We have condemned ourselves through our sin. He came to rescue us. Mm-hmm. And God giving his son and his son's willingness to come is a loving God looking at a humanity who is trapped. These are the metaphors. They're trapped, so they need rescued. They're spiritually dead, so they need reborn. They're lost in darkness, so he sent the light. It's a loving God who loved us so much that he gave his son so that we who do not understand generally the position we are in spiritually, while we were still enemies of God, he gave his son to die for us. So I want to expose the heart of God and what I call the mind of God. When God thinks about you, he does not resent you. He wishes that none would perish. When he looks at you, he's not looking for reasons to condemn you. He died once for all. The wrath of God is not here to be poured out on you. It was poured out on Christ. And he is a just God, and he is a righteous God, and there is a real hell. And God's greatest passion is that you would never experience any of that. So I'm going to tell that story, and that's what's embodied in Christ. And then I'm going to put it into a narrative that makes sense. I'm going to say it clearly. The focal point of the gospel is not our sin. The focal point of the gospel is God's love. Our sin is side B. God's love is side A. Yeah. It's the big thing. And sin is real. And we talk about repentance a lot at Grace Church, turning from walking away from God to turning to walking toward God. But the love of God is what I want to put on display. And then God did this so he could be known, and you could and you could know him. So we're going to talk in those ways. When we talk about sin, we're not going to talk about sexual morality and drinking and boozing. That doesn't make sense to people the way that it used to. When we talk about sin, we're going to talk about how you have been sinned against. you have abandoned people, you have been betrayed, you have been scared, you have been hurt. And by the way, we're sinners. We do that to people. And that's what sin is. And God came to rescue us from the sin that's been done to us and from the sin that we are doing to other people. So I'm going to talk about it that way. And then I'm going to look at you and say, what God says. So much of this for me is tone. And this is where you don't have to be me because I have other friends that use a different tone. But for me, tone, I'm going to look at you and say, you need to repent of your sin. And repentance means to turn around. You're walking away from God. And Jesus says, come to me. Don't run from me. And what you'll see, like the father with a prodigal son, you'll see a God waiting for you, who wants you, who came to get you. And that's what Christmas is. The baby in the manger is the man on the cross. And this was step one to the plan to give you the salvation and the life that God has called you to live. So it's going to be like that. And not always those words, usually that tone. And then that gospel, I'm going to tell it to you. We're going to sing about it. We're probably going to do some version of watch it through media. And then I actually really hope you experience it through just a love of people. And we just want to drench you in the gospel when you come to celebrate Christmas with us.
Yeah. Jeff, that's so good. For our listeners, I want to highlight a couple of these things, like being clear. We can sometimes so overcomplicate the gospel and have all these other things where it gets wrapped up in it. So, Jeff, I love what you're saying there. Clarity, defining your terms. When I say repentance, that means this. Explain some of the Christianese to people in everyday terms, and then give that invitation. And so many times we aren't clearly inviting people. Here's what we would like you to do with this. Yeah. And we'll stick around afterwards. We're happy to talk with you. We're happy to pray with you. Even, Jeff, so much as if you give us your contact information, we're going to call you. We're going to follow. I love all of that. It's having a purpose and a plan, clearly defining terms, giving the invitation. That's a big deal. If you take all that away from this episode, I think that's a win.
Can I talk about that invitation for a second, Eric?
Yeah.
One of the way that we do that, usually we do it different ways. The very effective way, normally if we gave a come forward invitation, nobody's going to come forward, So what we've done is we have prayer cards, and I hold those up, and you can go online and watch our Christmas services. You can watch me do this if you need an example, but maybe we could link a couple of them to the podcast notes. Excuse me. But what I do is I have a prayer card, and I will say to people, some of you have repented of your sins tonight and became a follower of Jesus. Check this box. Some of you have questions. Check this one. And some of you are just hurting. And so I want to make a promise to you. This is my promise. I promise that if you tell us how to pray for you on this card, I promise that before we leave the building today, we will pray for you. And if we can help you or serve you, give us your contact information. If you don't want us to contact you, write your first name down and we'll pray for you. And then we have people drop those off on their way out. In our case, we get hundreds of those. And we have prayer teams, and we do pray for people before we leave. And then if you ask to be contacted, we actually contact you before we leave the building. We'll text you before we leave the building. And it's a low pressure way to give an invitation. And then it also is broad. And what I found, good invitation facilitates good follow through. So there are times that like public invitations do that. We do this all the time at youth conference,
Yeah.
and we do it at our church too. Public invitations do facilitate follow through, but there are other times they don't. And so this is a way for us to get the broadest follow through, and we found that to be a very helpful tool.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, we hope that your Christmas services are better because of this conversation, that you get to see new families come and enjoy the message of the gospel and the hope that we have. So thank you for tuning into this episode, Jeff. Thanks so much for sharing your decades of experience.
Decades.
Well along.
Multiple decades.
You're a wonderful resource for us. Thank you for letting us even rip off all of your past sermons and analogies.
You didn't rip them off. Ready?
You gave
They're
them.
my Christmas gift to you.
Oh,
you like that, huh? That was off the cuff.
well done. Well done, sir. Hey, we really are here to help. We want to be a resource to you. We want to be a trusted ministry partner for you, for your church, for your congregation. We're excited to see. Please share with us what God did in and through your Christmas series. We'd love to know. We'd love to rejoice. We'd love to celebrate with you. We mean that. So reach out to us. info@buildmomentum.org is our email address. Can't wait to hear and see what God does in and through you this Christmas season. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. We hope you found it to be valuable. And if you did, would you share it with someone else in your network who might enjoy it? Also, would you please go on and subscribe, rate, and review it? That way you don't miss any more and somebody else will be able to find it too. Also, because we want to be your trusted resource, if you have a question or topic that you would like us to discuss on an upcoming episode, send that to us via email to info@buildmomentum.org, or you can send us a DM on any of our social media platforms. You can find us there at Momentum Ministry Partners. Also, if you need more information on our ministry, be sure to check out our website at buildmomentum.org. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you next time.